Devil May Cry has always been an interesting series to me because despite being near the top of the video game cultural zeitgeist for over 20 years, as a series it never seemed to balloon in popularity the way its contemporaries did. It was released on August 23, 2001, which, in America at least, means that not long after it came out, people had something else to talk about, but I don't think that has much to do with its popularity. Sales were decent, but the game was exclusive to the PlayStation 2 and had a reputation for punishing difficulty before mainstream gaming remembered that it kinda liked when things hurt a little. It also probably didn't help that most kids I knew in the early 2000s weren't getting new games when they came out. Instead, they had to wait for Christmas. And that meant that not only did some of its hype die out, but Devil May Cry was on a crowded shelf next to Final Fantasy X, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, Grand Theft Auto 3, Ico, Silent Hill 2, Jak and Daxter, Ace Combat 4, Gran Turismo 3, you get the idea. Between the difficulty and that level of competition, it's almost a surprise that the game succeeded at all. But a decent-sized contingent of die-hard fans hung on, and the series has continued despite some divisive development decisions. Speaking of those fans, I can't actually count myself among them, and I think it's important to frame this review properly. I've never liked Devil May Cry. I tried it once in my teens, and I absolutely sucked at it. This was before I put myself through the FromSoft meat grinder and learned that I could in fact get good, and then subsequently got older and learned that getting good isn't always very fun. On my first and last attempt with Devil May Cry, I made it to the first boss, but never beat him, and after slogging through the first few missions and receiving constant low grades, I turned it off and never tried it again. This was the right decision at the time. It was unfortunate though, because thematically, I love what DMC is selling. I like Dante's design. I like my video game characters like my swords, with lots of edge. That was a terrible joke. His sarcastic character mixed with the setting's demonic lore was immensely cool to a young me, but my personal inability to succeed at the combat mixed with the rating system caused me to bounce off of it like a concrete wall. Still, something compelled me to try again recently after going back to other classic games and finding so much to enjoy. So join me if you would like for this review of Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry is an action-adventure game and mommy's boy simulator developed by Capcom. It was directed by Kamiya Hideki and originally intended to be the follow-up to Resident Evil 3. In the game, players would take on the role of Dante, a professional demon hunter and wisecracking dweeb on his journey to cleanse the world of demons and take revenge for the death of his mother and twin brother, Virgil. Kamiya wanted to take the Resident Evil series in a new direction with faster, more action-oriented gameplay, but as the game strayed further from the series' survival horror roots, Mikami Shinji, the original director of Resident Evil, was able to convince the team to split the game off into a new series instead. Mikami would then go on to create the Resident Evil 4 we all know and love, which I personally still hold up as one of the greatest games of all time, so I think it all worked out in the end. Devil May Cry was also a success in its own right. It would go on to have a sequel we don't talk about, a prequel, another sequel, a reboot that we don't talk about, another sequel, 2 books, and 2 animated series as of this writing. Though it's interesting that all of those seem to have surprisingly little to do with Kamiya himself. Despite creating the series, it's said that he only found out a sequel had been started when that game's director asked Kamiya to share documentation that had been created for the first game. Kamiya would have nothing to do with DMC 2 and only advised some of the writing for DMC 3. Instead, he went on to direct Beautiful Joe and Okami before leaving Capcom to co-found Platinum Games, where he would direct Bayonetta. If you don't know, Bayonetta is an action-adventure game and daddy issues simulator where the main character uses her ancestral demonic powers to save the world and unravel the mystery behind her family trauma. That might sound familiar, but I wouldn't say it lacks originality because in this one you play as a woman, and that means when you use her special moves, her clothes come off. I'm sure there's a traumatic backstory for that, which, if I learned of it, would make me ashamed of my words and deeds. Devil May Cry opens with a text scroll over a demon doing sick kung fu moves. If you manage to tear your eyes from this display of terrifying skill, you'll learn about Sparta, the legendary Dark Knight who betrayed the Demon Emperor's demonic legions and saved the mortal world from invasion. Afterward, he stayed in the human world, protecting it until his death. Smash cut to a woman falling out of the moon, and I've got no clue what's going on, but when I see Dante's collection of heads pinned to his walls, suddenly it all makes sense. This is the distilled version of cool as seen by a kid who is definitely not me, who bought imitation swords from a peddler's mall. Dante is a leading man made of some combination of Alucard from Hellsing, Sephiroth, and Spike Spiegel. If we could see the notepad on his desk, it would be covered with the cool S, and the room probably reeks of Axe body spray. Somehow, despite all of this, Trish is not impressed.
You're the man who lost a mother and a brother to evil 20 years ago. The son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta, Mr. Dante.
Well, the way I figure it, in this business a lot of your kind comes around. And if I kill each one that comes, eventually I should hit the jackpot sooner or later.
In that case, you should be used to this sort of thing.
Are you really the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta? Didn't your daddy teach you how to use a sword?
Sword. Haha. Time to go to work, guys.
If you don't think stopping a motorcycle in midair by shooting it with dual pistols is cool, then I don't know what to tell you. You should probably see a doctor. If you want to talk about games as art, I have another channel for that, but in this house, we see this shit, we say, neat. We don't ask where the motorcycle came from, but if we did, it's actually on the street out in front of the office. And I think it might have been Dante's motorcycle? I think she stole his bike and drove it through his door. And then she picked it up and threw it at him, which is way cooler than anything Dante does in this whole game, and all I can say about it is, neat. Dante can't bring himself to kill Trish. He doesn't say it yet, but this is because she looks like his mom, which tracks with everything else I've said about him as a man. She tells him that Mundus, the demon emperor that Sparta betrayed and sealed away, has been revived and is working to open a gate between the worlds on Malay Island. They agree to partner up and set off to kill all the demons. Well, mostly they'll be killing a whole lot of mannequins, insects, some lizards, there's a cat, stuff like that, but there are also demons. And by they, I mean Dante. Trish is getting a headache from all the body spray, so before we even get to actually use the controller, she jumps up over a cliff and pretty much out of the game. We won't see her again for a long while, but I've got a feeling Dante's used to this kind of thing. For some reason, I always had the impression that he was supposed to be some kind of cynical joker of a character, but maybe that's built from the later games? We don't really get a ton of personality for him past the intro. Outside of the occasional boss cutscene, he doesn't really say or do much at all. He's just your stock white-haired guy with a big sword. Inside of the occasional boss cutscene, he's more awkward than cool. Often it'll feel like he's not really responding to what's said, or he'll just kind of monologue, and it makes me wonder how much was lost in translation. Here's an example. It's not really a spoiler, but it's 2/3 of the way through the game, and incidentally, this is the first time Dante has actually seen Trish since she jumped up that cliff. Keep in mind, Kamiya's stated goal for Dante was to make him cool. He was supposed to be the kind of guy that you wanted to go out and have a drink with.
You beat him. Maybe it was too easy for you.
Mundus. His heinous ways make me sick, killing even his own, like they were nothing. He's the one that took the life of my mother, my brother, Shirley. My mother used to always tell me that my father was a man who fought for me. He had courage and a righteous heart. In the name of my father, I will kill Mundus.
Now I like Dante, but as a guy who makes videos for YouTube about video games, I know what cool is. This is serving kid who believes in alpha males levels of cool, but hey, at least he looks good doing it. In the early missions, there are little bits of lore related to the castle sprinkled around on bookshelves and desks, and I really liked that, but it doesn't last long. Aside from those, you can get some nice flavor text from the enemy files that unlock under special conditions that range from just seeing them to parrying a specific attack with a certain weapon. I always love the idea of stuff like this, but I never actually wind up going back to read it. As far as the story goes, the game drip feeds it out over several hours, which leaves the gameplay to stand on its own. Luckily, the gameplay is pretty fun, if a bit repetitive. While I wouldn't call it boring, variety isn't exactly DMC's strong suit. There are only a handful of enemies, some of them are weaker copies of bosses that themselves are repeated several times, some are recolors of existing enemies, and some you'll almost never see outside of hidden areas. There are 4 melee weapons, but only 2 of them are really useful most of the time, and switching between them is a pain. I thought the weapon selection menu in Castlevania Lament of Innocence was annoying, but now that I see why they did it, I understand. Speaking of that game, I think Lament of Innocence got a lot of crap for ripping off Devil May Cry, but having played both for the first time in just the last year, I think it did a lot of things better. Granted, it also came out 2 years later, and the quality of the writing is about the same.
You have become a cursed being, and I will never forgive you. This whip and my kinsmen will destroy you someday. From this day on, the Belmont clan will hunt the night!
What were we talking about? Oh yeah. Each of those weapons only has a few attacks that fall into the category of combo, charge, launch, and juggle. You'll have to unlock most of these attacks either between missions or at these hourglass shrines using the red orbs that you get from killing enemies. You can cause enemies to drop more orbs by raising your combo grade in combat. Your score goes up by attacking consistently and with different moves, which can be difficult when you haven't unlocked the moves because the enemies don't drop a lot of orbs because you don't have a variety of moves unlocked yet. You get what I'm saying. The combat does feel good though once you get going. With stinger charges and knockups moving into combo attacks, you can use the pistols like a manual in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. What do you mean that analogy doesn't help? Okay, it's supposed to work as a way to keep your combo going if there's nothing nearby enough to hit, but the window to use the next attack is so small that even if you could weave in the guns, you're usually just better walking over to the enemy and starting your combo over. The different melee weapons are called devil arms because apparently they're made from the souls of demons, and it sounds like a pretty cool concept, but it doesn't really affect anything. They'll try to kill Dante in a cutscene before he can equip them, and this leads to what is simultaneously one of the coolest and dumbest scenes in the game when he comes across his first new weapon, the sword Alistair. Yeah, I love that. It's badass to pull the sword through. Not quite as cool as the motorcycle thing though, because look at that hilt. Why? Why do this? There's got to be a better way. Surely Dante has figured out another option, considering he's got about 25 of this exact sword on the wall of his office. Each melee weapon also comes with its own flavor of Dante's Super Saiyan mode, the Devil Trigger. If it didn't come through clearly from the opening cinematic, Dante is the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta, and despite acting like a man who owns a waifu body pillow, he inherited at least some part of his dad's martial prowess. When he hurts enough things, he can activate this mode to fly around, shoot lightning, heal over time, and generally make stuff deader faster. Unfortunately, making stuff deader is about the only thing Dante's really good at. Despite starting out as a Resident Evil game, Devil May Cry only has the barest hint of exploration and no real puzzles, though that might not be a negative to everyone. The game is split into linear missions rather than large open maps of interconnected rooms. Usually you can only go in one direction, clearing enemies until the door opens and occasionally running back through those same areas in the next mission with a key to open another door. There is some spice here and there in the form of secret missions that you can find inside of the normal ones that require you to finish a bonus objective, usually within a time limit. These will reward blue orb fragments that increases Dante's maximum health for every 4 that you find, and the missions can have a wide range of difficulty. There's one where you have to bait these 2 spiders into killing each other with their attacks, and it takes forever, but it's also in the middle of a level where you're carrying an object that constantly drains your health, and it was miserable. After this one, I just stopped looking for them entirely. If you do go after them, I'd recommend you pay attention to the loading screens. They aren't just flavor text. Once you complete the mission, you'll get the blue fragment, but it'll also give you a small pile of those red orbs you need to unlock new abilities, so they can be worth pursuing. But enemies generally respawn in the normal rooms too, so they're still optional. This loop of running around and fighting is interspersed with punishing boss fights that usually consist of running around and fighting, and they're only made harder by a really clunky fixed camera system that seems scientifically crafted to make sure you have no way to see what's attacking you. The bosses also have a tendency to be right in the middle of attacking you when a cutscene ends, and these things can combine to make the difficulty feel a bit artificially inflated. Finally, there is the rating system, and I'm just gonna say it, it's bullshit. If you're on your first playthrough, just ignore it. The rating is calculated by a combination of how long you spent in the level and how many red orbs you got. And that means if you were exploring because you hadn't already played the game before, you're gonna score low. It doesn't matter though, because there's no reward for scoring high. And if anyone ever asks you, "Hey, what grade did you get on mission 16 of Devil May Cry?" don't engage with them. You don't want to be associated with that person. You probably also don't want to associate with Phantom, the first of Mundus's lieutenants. He's a giant spider filled with lava and packing a scorpion tail, and if you're not a fan of spoilers, now might be the time to jump off the ride. There are chapters in the description and the timeline if you'd like to skip to the part where I'll summarize my feelings on the game, but that would be kind of weird. If you cared enough to avoid spoilers, you should play it first and then maybe come back if you'd like. Mundus has 3 lieutenants in the mortal realm. The spider Phantom, Griffin, who rather than being a griffin appears to be made out of a bunch of birds, and Nello Angelo. Phantom and Griffin are pretty straightforward exposition dispensers with health bars, but Nello Angelo is the standout, and he should be. Even the way he's introduced is way cooler than the others, and unlike every other character in the game, he lets his actions speak for themselves. Like every boss in the game, you'll fight him several times. The first time he defeats Dante, but leaves when he sees Sparta's amulet. Once he's finally defeated, it's revealed that he was actually Dante's long-lost brother Virgil. He drops the other half of their father's necklace, and the 2 halves open a portal to the demon world. It's kind of a dark mirror version of the castle, and is in no way a ripoff of Symphony of the Night. The amulet also releases the true form of the Force Edge. That's the sword Dante started the game with, but you stopped using it as soon as you got Alastor because you can't unlock any new moves for it. The true form of Force Edge is the legendary sword Sparta that was once wielded by the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. You can't unlock any new moves for it either. Now might be a good time to mention that even after finishing the game, I didn't unlock all of the abilities for Ifrit. That's the second devil arm that you find, and it's one of only 2 that you can actually upgrade. I never had enough red orbs, probably because I didn't go after all the secret missions, and I didn't spend much if any time grinding for orbs. I'm sure there are some DMC fans out there that would point out, rightly so, that I found the combat kind of repetitive and don't think that the other weapons besides Alastor are very useful because I didn't invest in them or use them, and that would be fair. The other weapons didn't feel as good, and I didn't need them, so I just kept putting blocks in the square hole. That's called a foo strategy. Anyway, while searching for Mundus, Dante finds a wounded Trish, but then he's attacked by a slime monster called Nightmare that we've already fought several times before, but unlike those other times, Trish shoots Dante in the back and reveals that she's been working for Mundus all along. After Dante defeats Nightmare, the room starts to collapse and he rushes in to save her despite the recent betrayal. She asks why and he says it's because she looks like his mother, but the next time he sees her, he'll kill her.
Don't come any closer, you devil! You may look like my mother, but you're nowhere close to her. You have no soul. You have the face, but you'll never have her fire!
I guess it's true what they say. Try to kill me once, shame on you. Try to kill me twice, well, I don't care how sexy you are, you're not my real mom. Which is a pretty weird saying. After jump-starting
the heart of darkness,
Dante finally comes face to face with the demon that destroyed his family, but he lets his guard down when he sees Trish very poorly shackled to the wall. Dante is wounded and nearly killed, but Trish shoves him out of the way, sacrificing herself. This pushes Dante over the edge, throwing him into some kind of true devil trigger mode, and starting the final fight against the Demon Emperor in the form of a rail shooter? I do not understand this gameplay transition. I mean, it's fine, it's cinematic or whatever, but I generally prefer when a game's climax feels like the culmination of the skills you were practicing throughout the game. Just like Beyond Good and Evil, this feels like a different game that was tacked on at the end, and like I said in the Asura's Wrath review, I've never really cared for rail shooters. Outside of the arcade setting, when I'm holding the light gun, I don't think they're particularly fun. But if you shoot Mundus enough, you can move on to Phase 2, where you can continue shooting Mundus because he's too big to be fought like a normal enemy. Finally, the Demon Emperor is defeated and Dante's family has been avenged. You can put down your controller and enjoy a heartfelt moment as he says goodbye to the woman who tried to kill him in half of the scenes that they were together.
My mother risked her life for me, and now you too. I should have saved you. I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Whoa, hold on, you're gonna leave the key to open a portal to the demon world in the demon world?
Now I'm giving it to you. My father's also here now. Rest in peace.
Oh, and the super powerful legendary sword your father left you. Alright. Well, there's no time to think about it. You need to pick that controller back up because the island is going to explode in 5 minutes and you have to run all the way back out through the Shadow Realm and the castle. On the way, the ground collapses and Dante is trapped in the sewers just as a partially ruined Mundus rips a hole into the mortal realm, and no, I don't know why he couldn't do that before. I'm pretty sure him making a portal into the mortal realm was the entire reason we came to this castle. He's all hands and eyeballs like something out of Dark Souls. Dante's about to lose the fight when he hears the voice of his mother, and then Trish teleports in because no one ever dies in this game, I guess. She shoots lightning into Dante's pistols, and with their combined powers they defeat Mundus once and for a while. Unfortunately, they're still stuck in a sewer on an island that's about to blow up, and I guess Trish can only teleport that one time. Things are looking pretty grim until an airplane crashes into the room, and Dante, apparently a trained pilot, uses the plane's machine guns to shoot down the stone sewer walls, and the two fly out through a very roomy series of caves. I love how Trish's hair is like 8 feet long in this cutscene, but not as much as I love this dialogue.
The sky! It's so clear! So blue!
The sky is fair. It'll always be above everyone's head, no different.
Like the sky. I feel like my heart is becoming clear.
Let's not forget, though, the Underworld's evil is still alive. They will someday return.
There's no need to worry, right? 'Cause the world has the legendary Dark Knight Dante and his sidekick.
Back at the office, Dante has changed the name of his business and the pair are killing demons together. Assuming you finish the game on its normal difficulty, you'll now unlock a harder mode and eventually a Dante Must Die mode after that, with some costume changes, but
ain't nobody got time for that!
On a first playthrough, the game is less than 10 hours long, unless you get stuck because of a difficulty spike. There's also the option to play the game on an easy difficulty if you die enough, and I don't think there's any shame in that either, but it seems like it might be a little too easy. There's a really nice HD collection available just about everywhere, but if you did wind up going the emulation route, you can also set up a macro to act as a turbo button so that you can just hold down the fire for the pistols, and that'll save you some carpal tunnel. Purists might turn up their nose, but a quick save will quickly save you from a lot of frustration. On the other hand, one major pro of going with the HD collection is that the captions actually work. Capcom took a long time to catch up with its accessibility features, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that DMC had the option for subtitles, only to find out that in the PS2 version, they're only there for the monsters, not Dante or Trish. We were so close, Capcom. So close. Overall, I enjoyed my time with Devil May Cry, and that's coming from someone with no real love for the series who fully expected to bounce right back off of it again. The combat took some getting used to, and I wouldn't blame anyone who didn't stick with it, but once you get Alistar and a few of the abilities unlocked, it becomes a lot more manageable. Also, don't forget, the ratings don't matter. Dante is still a cool character, and I enjoyed the pieces of world building that I got. There are a lot of loose ends with his family and the demon realm, and I'm looking forward to digging into those in future entries, though I know DMC 2 and the reboot are supposed to be a mixed bag. That's okay. I love a good bad game. I appreciate everyone who stuck around this long and everyone who has subscribed or commented or liked what I've been making. If this is the first thing you've seen of mine and you enjoyed it, there should be plenty in the backlog for you. Until next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Later.